This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Shalom Aleichem Rabbi Sai. We have a very interesting and timely topic tonight. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh Teves, and as we mentioned in an earlier share today, many associate Rosh Chodesh Teves with Rabbi Meir Bal Haness. Then Ish Chai says to light a ner le'iloi nishmas Rabbi Meir Bal Haness. It's brought in the Kaf HaChaim, and some even suggest that it's his yard site. But the topic I want to talk about is the topic of making Nedarim. The Mishnah says on Daf Tes, if somebody said that he wants to make a neder like a rasha, that's effective. But if somebody says he wants to make a neder like a kosher, it's ineffective, because Risha'im make Nedarim, Kesherim do not make Nedarim. The Gemara says there might be a difference between Nedarim and Nedavos, that maybe Kesherim do make Nedavos, but they do not make Nedarim. Everyone agrees Kesherim do not make Nedarim. The Gemara says, certainly it's better to make a neder and to pay it than to make a neder and not pay it. There's even an opinion that it's better not to make a neder at all than to make a neder and pay it. So the question is, it is pretty widespread that people pledge money to tzedaka. Is there any allowance for that? What is that based on? How can such a thing be done? So in other words, there's an appeal. You say, yeah, I'll give $10,000, I'll pay it up over the course of the year. Are you allowed to do that? There's an appeal in the shul. You want to call out your donation. Are you allowed to do that? So all of these things, it's pretty commonplace, but is that allowed? Is there any basis to be able to do that? So we're going to start with Tosfos in Masechta Chulin, if I'm not mistaken, on Daf Beis Amud Beis, and the Ritva in Nedarim on Daf Yud says basically the same thing. Here we go. Okay. Tosfos in Chulin, Daf Beis Amud Beis brings the end of this Tosfos. V'im Taimar. You'll ask, because the Gemara says Kesherim don't make Nedarim. Tosfos says, but what do you mean Yaakov Avinu made a neder? Vayidar Yaakov neder lemar. Yaakov made a neder. Uchsiv, it says in Yoina, Eis asher nadarti ashalema. I've been thinking about this topic a lot lately, and if you pay attention to Hallel, it basically says about 10 times, Nedarai Lashem ashalem negdana l'chol amoy. Now, by the way, what kind of Nedarim do you think David HaMelech was referring to? I think he was referring to Karbanos. When he says, Bechatzrois Beis Hashem, Besoichechi Yerushalayim, I'm assuming it's some kind of carbon. How many times does David HaMelech say just in Ma'ashiv Lashem, Kol Tam Geloi, Kois Yeshuas Esau B'Shem Hashem Ekra, Nedarai Lashem Hashem, Negdan Al-Chalamai, Yaakov Ben Hashem Amosach Zeva, Ana Hashem Yamniani Avdachan Ben Amosach B'Tem Amosach L'Chazbach Zevach Toido B'Shem Hashem Ekra, Nedarai twice in that parak alone, he says he's going to pay up his Nedarim. So if it's a bad thing, why are we singing it? We have to sing every Hallel with a different niggin. Why are we singing it? We should lament it. But Tosfos doesn't quote those psukim. And Tosfos says like this, V'yesh loymar de b'shas tzara shari. At a time of difficulty it's permitted. Kedamrinam bebereshis Rabbah, Vayidar Yaakov neder lemar. What does it mean, lemar? Ledoiros, sheyu noidrim be'es tzara. It's a limud that for all generations we're supposed to learn out from there to make nedarim. By the way, the Laniado hospital that was built by the Kloizer Merger Rebbe was because he made a neder during the Holocaust that if Hashem saved him, he's going to build a hospital for Jews. So, according to Tosfos, in general, nedarim, kesherim don't make nedarim. In other words, according to Tosfos, if yeshiva has an appeal, you can't make a neder. Only if a person has a certain eis tzara, they can make a neder. What's the reason? My understanding is the reason would be you don't have time, let's say, to give the money. You're really in a jam, but you need the zechus, so you make the neder. The merit of making the neder will accrue to you, and then Be'ezus Hashem you'll get around to paying it. But so to speak, there's no time. The person doesn't have time because he's in an eis tzara. Let's see the Ritva. The Ritva on our Gemara says like this: V'kashalan hechi amrinan de neder aser. How can you say it's also make a neder? Lo mikra malei dibra kasav nidroi v'shilmoi lashem lekeichem v'chol neder b'mashma. It's mashma any neder. Uchsiv vayidor Yaakov never neder. V'lo having nedava. That would don't say well that was different. It was a nedava. Ela nederhu. Daha ksiv kol asher titen li aser asren ulach. Uchsiv vayidar Yisrael neder lashem. Vayomer, we have a pasuk in Chukas where all of Klal Yisrael made a neder. Vayomer im nasoin titein Hashem biyadi. So tertzu b'tois. This the Shas Tzara Shani. The Amrinan behagada we say Vayidar Yaakov neder lemar ledoiros. From there we learn out sheyu nojum be'is tzara. Perush im hu chaylev. Someone is ill. Oy benoy kiyotzebay mutar. Or if a person or his son is incarcerated. I'm sorry, excuse me. Mutter loy lemar kach v'kach etein in Masrapa. You're allowed to say, I'll give X amount of tzedakah if I'm healed, im enetzel mitzara, or if I'm saved from distress. V'zeh hoyon nidroi shal Yaakov. That was a neder of Yaakov. It was a neder be'is tzara. He was running away from Esav. He was headed to the danger of Lavan, and therefore he was allowed to make a neder. Nedarim shal Yisrael. Likewise, when Klal Yisrael made a neder, is because they were b'tzara. For this reason, noagu b'miktsas mekaymos litain tzedakos v'shemen lamar b'Rosh Hashanah v'Yom Kippurim belvad. That's why we pledge money on the high holidays only on those days. Why? Lefi shehu yom adin. It's a day of judgment. Shesifrei chayim suchim lefanav. The book of the living is open. V'hava eisara. You know why we pledge tzedakah? We only do it on the high holidays. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Ulefikach noidrin kedei lehinatzel min adin. V'noidrin lemachrasai la'alter. Now what does it mean? V'noidrin lemachrasai la'alter. It's a ta'as sofer. It means v'noisnin lemachrasai, and we pay it up the next day. So if you pledge on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you make sure that you pay your pledge the next day. But what about places that they make appeals not on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? I don't know if in your shul they make appeals ever, but there are shuls in the world that they make appeals. You will in your lifetime get a phone call. Would you like to pledge over the phone? So, is there any basis for that? Says the Ritva, V'shar mekaymo shenagu lidar tzedakos b'Shabbos v'Yom Tovim, other places that the minhag is to make pledges on Shabbos or Yom Tov, yesh liyashiv minhagan sha'oisen kain mibnei sheyesh matzar la'aniyim. You could answer up this practice because it is distressing for the aniyim. The aniyim are in a bind. And if they're just going to say, okay, does anybody would like to participate? And Yankel says, yeah, bli neder, I'm going to give $1 million to tzedakah. That's very nice that Yankel, bli neder, is going to give $1 million to tzedakah. You know what that means when Yankel says he's going to give bli neder $1 million to tzedakah? It means he's not going to give even 1 cent to tzedakah. And if Yasula says that he's going to give, he doesn't pledge anything, but he's going to give as much as he can, that means he's going to slam the door on the Ani's face the next time the Ani comes to his house. So if we don't allow people to make Nedarim, the Aniyim are not going to have any money. If we don't make a Neder today on a day of gathering, the Aniyim would not have what they need. Therefore we are reliant to be lenient because of the lacking of the poor who they stand in distress. So the first answer is we do it because Eis Tzara is different. That's what Tosfos says in Chulin. That's what the Ritva says in Nedarim Daf Yud. But then the Ritva adds another kula that if we don't pledge, then it's going to be distressing for the aniyim. I would just humbly assert that probably that's what yeshivas rely on. Even though they're not aniyim, maybe you could say their teachers might be in that category, the rabbeim, but for any organization to operate in a successful way, they have to make sure that people give money, and nobody's giving any money if they don't pledge. And the Ritva doesn't say that. The Ritva doesn't apply this to yeshivas or other organizations, but maybe you could understand that the same type of svara would apply to other organizations. Now, I'll share with you the Gemara's conclusion seems to be that it is not permitted to make Nedarim in general, and the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Gimel Sif Dalet says, B'derech Klal, it's better not to make a neder, even to tzedaka. Rather, if you have money, then you can make a neder and give it right away. The Lashon of Shulchan Aruch is Tzarch Lizar Shelo Yidar Shum Davar Va'afilu Tzedaka Ein Tov Lidar. Even for tzedaka, it's not good to make a neder. Elam Yeshnoi Biyadai. If you have it, Yitin Miyad. V'im Lav Lo Yidar. Otherwise, don't make a neder until you have it. And if they're making an appeal and you need to join with them, you should say Beli Neder. So it seems like the Shulchan Aruch holds, like the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, that when it comes to tzedaka, if you have it in your house, so then you could make this nedava. The Shach explains that in a situation where you have to make an appeal, you have to participate in an appeal, it's not enough if you think b'li neder, you need to say b'li neder. So, what do we rely on in our appeals that we make in shuls and other organizations? The Debretzina Rav in Be'er Moshe, Siman Aleph Ois Nun Zayin, actually in Chelek Aleph, Siman Nun Zayin, he's also bothered, what do we rely on to make an appeal? Making an appeal is mamish keneged halacha and Shulchan Aruch. Now, if everyone's going to say that they give it bli neder, then the appeal is pointless. The point, right? When somebody says no, bli neder, you say no, make the neder. We need you to make the neder. Otherwise, making the appeal is pointless. He says many rabbanim gedolim tzadikim who came from Europe basically forced their kehila to pledge money to tzedaka. And the Debretzina Rav says the heter is based on the ritva that we just learned, that the aniyim are in distress, and if we don't ensure that people commit today, you'll never see the money. Okay, so what I want to talk about tonight, which I think the connection between Rabbi Meir and Rosh Chodesh Teves is specifically Aleph Teves, but it's as good a time as any. Many people pledge money to Rabbi Meir Bal Haness. So, is that permitted? Is that okay? So first let's see the Ritva, first let's see the Birkei Yosef of the Chida in Shiurei Bracha, where the Birkei Yosef addresses this issue. Let's see. Okay. The Birkei Yosef brings this as a chida. Be'ez Sarah Mutter Lindar. At the time the Shas Yulan make a neder. B'sefer Now here's a very important yediyah, and that is not all Rishonim agree with the Ritva and Tosfos. The Aguda holds even be'ez Sarah you cannot make a neder. The chida brings B'sefer Ha'aguda Parak Daled Nedarim Kasav Hanoider Afal Pisha Mekaimai Nikra Rasha. One who makes a neder, even if you keep it, you're called a rasha. Yesh Mefarshim, says the Agoda, afilu benoide be'ez Sarah. Daha al kol nedarim ma'isila. By the way, what about selling aliyahs? Is buying an aliyah a neder, or is that a purchase? And the seller is a tzedaka. Not sure. So the Chida says the Aguda Shita is very difficult, because Chazal say mutter lidar be'ez Sarah tichsiv vayidar Yaakov neder leimar ledairos. So how's the Aguda going to deal with Tosfos' kasha that Yaakov made a neder be'ez Sarah? And the Chida says that, in my humble opinion, I don't agree with the various answers offered in the Achronim. Let's say the Maram Mintz in Siman Ayin Tes says that at the time of the neder, he didn't realize that he's not allowed to keep it. Or he didn't know. V'hu mitzvah after acher kach asur l'kaimai. Meaning, the Maramin says that even though if somebody makes a neder be'ez tzara, it's only permitted if you didn't realize that you're not allowed to fulfill it. And once you made it, you have no choice but to fulfill it. Because how could you say that about Yaakov Avinu? Meaning the Maramitzim seems to say that Enechanami, even if you fulfill your neder that was made by Isara, you're called a Rasha. You're really not allowed to fulfill it, but you don't have a choice because you made it. And how are you allowed to make it? If you forgot. So the Chida says, I don't understand that. How can you say that about Yaakov Avinu? He didn't know that he's going to be in a situation where he won't be allowed to fulfill it, but he'll have to? Now, listen to this. The Knesset Hagdoila gives a different answer. The din that you're not allowed to make a neder be'ez tzara is a neder of a carbon. But because the animal might die. Or you won't be able to make it to Yerushalayim. But tzedaka, you could do. Says the Chida, that's not mashma from the Aguda that tzedaka you'd be allowed to do. It sounds like you can't make any type of neder. I would ask, it's not mashma from David HaMelech. What kind of nedarim did David HaMelech make? L'chayr, David HaMelech was making nedarim of karbanos. And furthermore, that which he answers, that in fact Yaakov Avinu was punished. That's why Rachel died, because he made a neder. No, says the Chida, that's not why Rachel died. Rachel died because Yaakov delayed fulfilling the neder, not because he made it and fulfilled it. And B'chlal, we have psukim in Tehillim where David HaMelech says, Avoy beischa be'oilois, ashalem lecha nedarai, which clearly David HaMelech is articulating that he is fulfilling his neder of karbanos. So that's a worthwhile shita to know. The opinion of the Aguda is that even be'ez tzara, you're not allowed to make a neder, and there are many psukim that seem to be contrary to that. What about donating? What about making a neder to Rabbi Meir Bal Haness? So the Chida says a few things about this. In Siman Reish Gimel, the Chida says that even though tzedaka, it's not good to make a neder, if you make a neder to encourage other people to give tzedaka, it's a mitzvah. So if you're at an appeal, and you say, you know what, if I don't pledge, then 7 guys behind me are not going to pledge either, then you're allowed to make a neder kedei lios masa acherem. Now that l'chayra is a good heter, and it's a legitimate heter. And by the way, the Chavetz Chaim in the Avas Chesed says that actually there is a certain maila of making the pledge, because we learn out from Biglal Hadavar Hazeh that there's a mitzvah to give and a mitzvah to say that you're going to give. And if you don't pledge, you lose the mitzvah of saying you're going to give. He brings from the Radvaz in the Tshuva that you're allowed to make a neder to tzedakah. You're allowed to say Sela Zul tzedakah b'shul sheyichya b'ni, meaning even not be'isar. There is a shita of the Radvaz that it's mutter. Therefore, the Chida says there is a smach, that which many pledge money to Rabbi Meir in order to get something that they need to find in Aveda or to have a certain hatzlacha. Many rely on this and they pledge money to Rabbi Meir Bal Haness, but the Chida says better than pledging is just to give it. So again, how is that consistent with what he said in Aleph? Aleph is talking about there are other people around. You want to encourage them, so you pledge. But if you need something and you want to give to Rabbi Meir, so then just give it, don't pledge. And then he says, Agavurcha, he quotes Ramami Pano in Maimer Chikar Hadin, that say Ela Ka de Rebbi Meir Anini, and have kavana, that your kavana is all the kavanas that Rabbi Meir himself had. Okay, and I'll just end off with the tshuva of Reb Chaim Falaji in Shal Tshuva's Leiv Chaim Chelik Beis and Kuf Samach, that giving money to Meir Bal Haness is not only to find an Aveda, it's an early minhag that in any Eis Sarah or birth, we light Neiros, we give Tzedaka. The Lashon of Reb Chaim Falaji is Ki HaMinhag Iker Shenaspashed B'chol Tfutzos Yisrael Ba'arei Chutz Haaretz Mizeh Kama Me'yoshanu, it's many hundreds of years, Sheyesh Ezat Sarah Kamay Chayla, if you have a certain distress, like a Chayla, Uviyois Tov Shetekubal Tfilasei Baratzain, Harei Mechavin Li'iloi Nishnos Rabbi Meir Kazev, Omer L'Kader Rabbi Meir Anini, Kamay Kain B'Yoshevas Al Mashber, if somebody is on the birthing stool Sha'oisin Kaseder Bazeh. Okay, Rabbi Sai, so these are some ideas about the Iyun of pledging to Tzedaka, even though the Gemara's conclusion is that it's better not to make a neder. Okay, have a good day, everyone. Bracha v'hatzlacha. Kol tov.
Recording stopped.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.